As we continue to gain airspeed and altitude this afternoon, I'd like to introduce, Casey Swails, who's going to speak with us this afternoon and give us some insight into future plans. Casey is NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator, serving as the agency's Deputy Chief Operating Officer for their more than 18,000 employees and an annual budget of over $25 billion. Deputy and Principal Advisor to the Associate Administrator for overall day-to-day operations and long-term strategic direction across NASA's 10 centers and 5 mission directorates and staff organizations. She establishes the overall strategy, framework, and structure for NASA's integrated mission support portfolio and builds and advances the agency's industry partnerships. In addition, Casey is leading the NASA 2040, the agency's strategic initiative to ensure that NASA remains the preeminent institution for research, technology, and engineering to lead science, aeronautics, and space exploration for humanity in and through the year 2040. Casey holds a BS in Management from Georgia Institute of Technology, an MBA from Duke University, and has completed the executive education at Harvard's Business School. Please join me in welcoming Casey.
All right, good afternoon. Let's try that one more time because I know I have the spot between now and happy hour, which is also very dangerous. Good afternoon. There we go. Okay, everyone's awake. Well, I actually will say I think the timing is quite ideal to go after the AI and workforce panel because a lot of what you'll hear around 2040, and this was really said in the AI panel, I forget which panelists mentioned this, but said, hey, to do all the complexities of the mission that we have, across space, it requires the infrastructure on the ground, the capabilities on the ground, the investments in technology on the ground. And that's been a large part of what 2040 is about, which is, what I heard that folks really wanted me to talk about today at Braun. So we'll spend some time talking about that. But before that, I really want to, let's see. Don't think this is mine, but I'm happy to talk about Artemis and a foundation for deep space exploration. Yeah, this definitely is not mine. Let's see if we can get the right set of charts up here. I think I see Jennifer going off to check. Okay. Well, I'll just kind of talk a little bit about 2040 while we're doing that. I was going to share a video, which we'll do hopefully when we get the right set of charts up here. How many of you have seen kind of our 2024 highlights video? Okay, not too many. Okay, so hopefully we'll get an opportunity to show that here in a minute, but I think it'll really go to show just the breadth of all the things that we're working on. And that's really kind of the intention of 2040 is to start thinking about not just the short term, but the long term and the actions that we need to take in the short term to kind of realize that vision. Because there's a lot that we're trying to do that's very complex, very different. And I often talk about the space economy and how much that's shifted just in the last decade or so. It's also, I think, the most exciting time to be in space. When I started at the agency 20 years ago, I can say it's a very different place than where we are today. It was good to see my friend Dale, because I used to work with him closely, even during the Constellation days. But even then, it's just changed so much. And I look at how much industry's grown internationally, how much things have grown. I actually had an opportunity to go to the Middle East just this last week and would love to share more with folks individually about that because it really was a fascinating visit. And what it reminded me of and what 2040's been about is really around kind of our leadership role in setting that vision, setting that direction, not just for the U.S., but for the entire world. And so that's really what it's about when we're trying to get ready for 24.
It's a new day in space exploration. As we sail on this new cosmic sea, there's so much to learn. There's so much to be excited about. American companies will land payloads on the moon for the first time. These missions are really challenging and risky. They're going to help us conduct new science.
Artemis is different from anything humanity has ever embarked on before. And we will discover life-saving, earth-changing science and technology along the way.
We're delving deep into what science can be achieved by humans working together with robotic capabilities and future infrastructure to support a long-term human presence at the moon.
The main purpose of the International Space Station is to perform science.
The fact that we'll have two companies able to provide the opportunity to reach low Earth orbit, but it'll change the way we look at how we fly to space.
And the more we learn about the Earth and the more we understand the processes that affect it, the better we can plan for the future.
The needle-nose jet, the X-59, it will revolutionize the aviation industry. We will show what is possible when we dare to reach distant cosmic shores.
Totality, everyone.
Wow. Look at that. Fantastic.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous.
Onward and upward.
Well, glad you like it, because I've had an opportunity to watch that video probably about 50 times, and I still get chills every time I see it. So it's really exciting and phenomenal to see all the things that we're doing. And I wanted to start out with this because I think this goes to show kind of the breadth of destinations that we're trying to tackle with the complexity of our mission. And everything in 2040 has to be grounded in the mission and what we're trying to achieve. And so I showed just kind of this visual, and I won't spend time doing this. There's lots of people that are really talking about these topics over the course of Von Braun, but what we're trying to do in air, a full mapping of the Earth, all that's happening in LEO. Anyone know how many launches just from the Kennedy Space Center we're expecting this year? Over 100, which is really quite incredible when you think about just what's happening in low Earth orbit. The moon, Mars, beyond, so lots in work. And I think because of that, it's so critically important that we're really thinking about not just these missions for today, but the missions of the future. So let me back up to, I guess, just a couple years ago, shortly after this administration. We were having a lot of conversations around, hey, with kind of the robustness of the space economy, what's changing over just the last decade, what we're projecting to change over the course of the next decade, how does this change NASA's role? What is really NASA's role when you think about kind of the future and that leader in the overall space economy? So back up to about a year ago, we were a little over a year ago, it was kind of May of last year, we were all in Cleveland for an offsite, and we had been having a lot of conversations leading up to that point of NASA of today, NASA of tomorrow, and then the institution that we really needed to support that. And we sat in the room and we really talked about, what our role was. And I'd had a lot of conversations across industry at that point. We're having a ton of conversations and dialogue overseas. As you've probably seen, we now have it's either 46, I think it's 46 now signatories for the Artemis Accords. I can't keep track, so we just had 2 signatories just in the last week. And what we talked about was it's really important for NASA to play that leadership role, to really provide kind of that strategy, that direction, and to be that preeminent institution for pushing those boundaries. And one of the things that I often talk about, particularly when I talk to students or really any audience, is the role that we get to play for the benefit of humanity. And I think that for humanity part it's frankly the really cool part. It's why I've been excited to be a part of NASA the last 20 years and continue to be excited because I think that's a really special, charge that we have that not every organization and or industry can say that we do. And so we all get to be a part of that. So talking about really kind of that leadership role and what that means and kind of the changing economy. So this was the vision that we came up with. We wordsmithed this real time in Cleveland at Glenn and really said, hey, it's really important to ensure that we're taking action today to ensure that we are that preeminent institution in the future. So that's kind of where NASA 2040 is born, and it's really an agency transformation initiative to really propel us into the future. So you've probably heard a lot about our Moon to Mars architecture. You probably recently saw that we've released a LEO microgravity strategy. You probably saw that we recently released a list of technology shortfalls. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking about the future and how do we have an architecture and a plan where we're starting from the right and working backwards to the left, and how does our institution really fit into that? And so that's what 2040 was really about, is hey, let's start from the right, talk about the year 2040 and what are the institutional transformation initiatives that we need to implement starting today, so taking those actions today to really make sure we're set up for success in the future. So kind of the drivers and the why behind NASA 2040, and just a show of hands, has anyone seen the National Academies report that recently came out? Yeah, so it's funny, we actually started 2040 right before the academies kind of kicked off with their study. And, I think what it's really shown us is that we've been on the right track with all the things that we've kind of been working on, because a lot of the summary and their findings of the report are really well aligned with the things that we've been working on in the last year for 2040. But just kind of, I think, just to get to some of the whys behind it. So when you think first about the external drivers, I think that, we'll continue to have a bold, exciting mission, huge goals, but we'll always have limited resources. And really making sure we're making those investments for the mission today, but also in the future, was a huge driver for us. Also thinking about, as we shift our role in that space economy, what are the areas that we do need to invest in? Where are industry capabilities grown? Where are the areas that, frankly, as we look forward, how do you make those difficult decisions on where to divest? Where do you kind of make those bets with industry, make those trades? But that dynamic ecosystem, as it continues to grow, has required us to take kind of a hard look at what does that mean for our role. Internal drivers, it's no secret our institutional investment has not kept pace with the mission. If you look over the course of NASA's kind of budget history, just in the last decade, our overall agency budget has gone up. Our institutional budget has stayed flat, which is really challenging. If any of you have overhead budgets that have stayed flat for the last decade, as your top line has gone up, please come talk to me, because it's been really, really challenging. Particularly as you think about, we just heard this panel on, this great panel on workforce, this great panel on AI. How do we set aside, kind of resources to make those investments when you have kind of a flat or, declining budget when you take into account inflation? So that's been something that we've really wrestled with. We have a very complex organization, a complex matrix structure, and I think it's more important now more so than ever that we're really aligned, that we're all rowing in one direction as an organization. Frankly, I don't think we can afford to have 10 different centers that are doing rowing in, different directions. And I think that alignment across our leadership team has been really, really critical and really important as the complexity of our mission has increased. So how do we leverage those assets, those capabilities, make investments across the entire organization, so frankly that we're, not leaving, certain organizations behind. So that's been really important. And then the last piece is really having that unified leadership commitment to our workforce. I think our workforce is our most critical asset. We often say our people first, mission always, and this is really around how do we make sure NASA is a place that our workforce of the future is excited to be at. And knowing now with the growing space economy that, the demand for a talented workforce continues to grow. A lot of times when you all come in to talk to us, the question I always ask is, hey, what's kind of your biggest challenge? And most of the time it goes back to workforce, having kind of the talent, having the capability in that pipeline has been kind of I think, big, concern for industry. And it is for us as well. So the way 2040 was structured was around this idea of an engine. So kind of think of the engine is a central hub. So the engine is responsible for identifying interdependencies between 7 work streams that we have in play throughout 2040. They're responsible for communications to the workforce, working with each of the work streams. And I'll give you an example on interdependencies. One of the top things that surfaced from all of these work streams was the topic of IRAD. Were we making enough investments in IRAD as we go forward, for the long-term kind of sake of our mission and for that development of the workforce? So it came up across mission, it came up across structure, budget, technology, people. So we actually spun that out as kind of a separate Tiger team to really talk about IRAD. So that's where the engine's been really helpful. The other work streams that you see on there, I'll talk a little bit more about as we go forward. This is a picture of our 2040 kind of leadership at a glance. I'm sure you'll see a lot of familiar faces on there. And really the intention here is around showing you that this is a whole of agency effort. I mean, we've really been focused on this as an entire leadership team. And so if you look kind of starting, you'll see the kind of engine top line, each of the work streams, and on the left-hand side is essentially the owner of each of the work streams. So think of this as kind of the highest level agency official responsible for that particular work stream. So you see, Pam Melroy, our deputy administrator herself, responsible for the mission strategy work stream, Jim, structure, our CFO responsible for budget and so on. And then as you move over to the right, we had executive sponsors. Those primarily consist of, center directors, mission directorates, our business leaders. So a lot of our officials in charge really to show that alignment and to make sure we were driving this kind of at all levels. And then on the far right, we had work stream leaders. So these were executives across the agency. We really wanted to make sure this was a diverse mix. And then what's not shown on here is that we have teams under each of these. So a variety of folks from, again, across the agency. That was really the intention, is to have it be kind of a diverse whole of agency effort. One of the other things that we also did as part of kind of the working level was thinking through, hey, how do we get voices across all of our workforce? So I've now conducted roundtables, multiple roundtables actually across every single center. We have a network of, we're calling them employee champions. So we have over 400 employee champions that kind of serve as that liaison to leadership. Jennifer's giving me 200. So across leadership to really be that liaison between our workforce and the leaders in their organizations. And it's kind of been almost like, think of it as, kind of this voice for leadership, but also almost like a round table for them to rely on and what they're hearing down within the organization. So it's been really, really incredible to see. So let me start with kind of mission strategy, because this was a really important part when we started thinking about that broader ecosystems of partners across the space economy and NASA's role within that. So when we started talking about this, hey, what is NASA's role The mission strategy team, the one that is owned by Pam Melroy, kind of came back with a framework thinking about how do we make those shifts with what NASA's role is with these 5 categories. You know, NASA is no longer just the doer. You know, we are still a doer, but we also play a role as an integrator, as a catalyst, as a requirer, and as an advisor. And frankly, seeing kind of where NASA has made those shifts over time, you think of something like the ISS, we've inevitably spanned all of these roles. You think about what we're doing with CLIPS, we're heavily focused on that catalyst role right now, making some really risky investments, trying to develop capabilities to get mass to the moon quicker. So being able to see, having our workforce be able to see themselves in these roles, having a framework for us to have those leadership discussions on where we make those shifts was really, really important. So that's been fun to see. And then you think about, you know, areas where in the past we might have played a doer role, like you think about rocket propulsion test at Stennis, where now we're playing a key role in advising. Also thinking about an area like hypersonics where we've played a role primarily as kind of advising, and now we're thinking more around, hey, where are the areas that we need to be doing more in that space to continue to deepen kind of technical expertise. So it's been a really good framework for us to have those discussions as it relates to our strategies around Moon to Mars, LEO microgravity, and various acquisitions that we have in the pipeline. This is another work stream that I really wanted to highlight because I think it's really important and timely. We just had the AI discussion. So this is really all around technology, and it's not as much been focused on the technology that is our jobs. Not that we're not focused on that, but again, the whole piece around 2040 was how do we make sure NASA as an institution is ready. So this is more around the technology to help us do our jobs. And these were kind of the 5 big thrust areas. One of the things, frankly, that we have struggled with a little bit is not having interoperable data because of kind of centers and where they've been over the last couple decades. You know, up until, if anyone remembers kind of MAP, when the agency went through that big alignment where we had 10 different CIO shops. Well, it's, you know, no surprise that we didn't have interoperable data between all of the different centers. So that's been really a huge focus for us, is how do we better share that data? How do you implement AI on something that's already doesn't have kind of an interoperable platform? So we've been thinking a lot about that digital ecosystem. Cybersecurity's been a huge focus for us as we move forward, and we've had kind of a huge push on that just in the last year as we've seen more and more of, I would say, the bad actors kind of increase. But this is really what this is about, is kind of having that ecosystem, not only just across centers for the ease of doing business, but really to make sure our workforce has the tools that they need to lean forward in the mission. Infrastructure, another huge one that we have spent so much time really focused on over the course of really the last year. So I would describe our agency master plan previously as 10 center plans stapled together. That's kind of where we were in the past, and where we've tried to get to is kind of a one agency approach on having an aligned agency master plan. So being thoughtful around where are we making those divestments, where are we making investments across our infrastructure, both for existing assets, but future assets that are needed. Where are the things that, frankly, we need to outgrant, you know, where maybe there's an industry need that we no longer have a need for. So a couple years ago, it probably would have been difficult for me to even tell you how many assets we have. So we have, you know, close to 5,500 assets across the agency. Now we have a good, healthy portion of those. We have about, you know, 600 of those ready for demolition, frankly, because they're not being utilized anymore. And, you know, really thinking smartly around what are the things we're really going to need in the future. So there's been a ton around infrastructure, really thinking about that, but then also thinking about, hey, how does industry even know what we have out there and have available? You kind of have to you have to know, you have to, you know, kind of have connections with, you know, with NASA. And so we've been thinking a lot about partnerships, particularly partners that may be untethered to NASA today and how they do business with us in the future. And so that's been huge for us to kind of think through. Workforce, super important work stream that we've been thinking about. One of the things as we start thinking about the workforce, and this came up in the workforce panel, is this idea around a value proposition, and really what is NASA's value proposition to the workforce of the future? What is it that employees, when they choose to come work for NASA, can expect? And for us, it's really around connecting to a really exciting mission, having a variety of experiences, that we're supporting them as an entire person throughout their career journey when they come to work at the agency. And so we've been heavily invested in kind of thinking through our commitment to them, and then also what is kind of the commitment we're expecting from the workforce of the future. And so one of the things that we realized is that we needed to get back to making some very intentional investments. Frankly, with the flat line in kind of our overall institutional budget that I described, this is one of the easier things, and one of the first to go is kind of those future investments of, hey, well, we'll just kind of cut this training. We'll cut, dollars to this leadership development program. Employee details start to go down. Availability for conferences, digital subscriptions. Those have been the things that we're really invested in trying to bring back to, I would describe as a healthy level for our workforce. And we're calling them DARE initiatives. How do we develop, attract, and retain kind of the workforce of today, but then have those things in place for the workforce of the future? And then also thinking about those things as we lean forward and think about this broader ecosystem. Where are the things that we need to shift from where we've been? So thinking about even public-private talent exchanges. So one of the things that we have actively in legislation today is the ability to do just that. We actually recently kicked off a leadership development program, giving employees the ability to do either a couple weeks, multiple months with an industry partner. We actually just had an employee at the Ames Research Center who was a part of this leadership development program go to Google and work in their federal sector space for an immersion and has come back. So really thinking about those things of how do we give employees kind of a variety of experiences so that they recognize and know how to better kind of work with industry and partner and be forward-leaning in kind of the approaches that we're taking. So a lot of exciting things, I think, happening in the workforce piece, and it's been a huge, I think, loud kind of screaming need from our employees. We'll hear a lot of things like, well, whatever happened to, we used to have, XYZ program, or used to be able to go to this leadership, thing at a university. So those are the types of things that we're really trying to get back to. Speaking of things that have kind of spun out of 2040, as we were having discussions on the structure of the agency, we started talking about, hey, are we positioned for success as an organization in terms of being easy to do business with? How many of you feel like you could say where NASA's front door is? Okay, yeah, lots of laughs, because the truth is there's really not one. It depends, right? It depends. It's even if within a center, you could say, hey, is it through the center director? Is it through procurement? Is it through one of the program offices? At an agency level, same kind of questions come up. Do I talk to the mission directorate? Do I talk to the center? Do I talk to procurement? Do I talk to the Office of Small Business? Do I talk to your partnerships office that's in a different organization? So we've been talking a lot around, hey, how do we continue to move forward with agility in terms of partnerships as we go forward? We've actually spent a lot of time trying to drive down the timeline for how long it takes to execute a partnership agreement. So we were somewhere, I think, around 140-something days about a year ago. I think now we're down to about 90 days. Those vary by centers, depending on kind of the complexity of the partnership agreement, and then also how much those partnership organizations are resourced. So that's something we've been heavily focused on. But the front door is really around how do we enable a front door through technology, making it easier for parties to work with NASA. This doesn't mean you can't still call XYZ person at a center that you've always worked with. by all means, we would encourage people to still do that. But what we're hearing more and more is, hey, how do I do business with NASA? And we're finding a lot those are individuals that are currently untethered or, are exploring opportunities across maybe multiple centers. So really looking at, if anyone's seen, we recently released something called NASA Engages for our workforce as a way to go out and engage with industry. So we're kind of expanding this thing of NASA Engages to thinking about it in terms of partnerships. So imagine kind of a future where you can go in and say, hey, I need access to a wind tunnel. I'm located in, in XYZ city. What does NASA have available? Being able to kind of have a catalog to be able to look at that, being able to look at NASA experts that you need to engage with, et cetera. So, and those are the two things that we find that people really want. They want access to expertise and facilities. And so that's something that the front door we're really hoping will help enable. Again, not to create this big organization that you got to go through 1,000 gates. It's really kind of a technology platform to enable ease to see kind of what's out there. And if you don't know who to contact, kind of where to go. It'll also, I think the goal is to give us a better idea of our customer base. Right now, if you sign, let's say you're working across multiple centers, have multiple partnership agreements, most of that, us knowing that is manual today. So it's really, frankly, for us to be able to work better with you, kind of knowing what's out there. And this is really kind of just showing our high-level schedule. I call this kind of the path to NASA 2040. So we're actually kind of over here on the right. We've been working on this over the last year, really focused on kind of these 7 work streams, these teams coming forward with recommendations. We did it in what I'll call kind of a staged approach. We kicked off mission strategy, structure first. Then we onboarded, people, technology, infrastructure, process was one of the last ones, budget also in there. And so we are now kind of, I would say, at the tail end of these work streams, providing back their recommendations. And then the idea in 25 is that we start to move into implementation. As far as, I would say, kind of the money behind this, we were already in the 24 year, we had already submitted 25, so the idea is that, some of the investments that we're making related to these work stream recommendations will start in 26. We actually had our leadership team kind of vote across each of, the recommendations from these work streams. Again, one of the top ones that came out was around IRAD, having more, funding for our employees to help advance early stage, kind of technologies that ultimately could be really transitioned into industry, into other programs. And so looking forward to that in 26 and 25 is all about kind of getting ready. Okay. I think that's really most of it. And I know I'm keeping folks between happy hour and I'm over. So I am intending to go to happy hour. So Jim, what I thought I'd do is just offer to connect with folks on questions at happy hour since we're already a little bit over time, if that works for people.
I think that's just fine, so absolutely.
All right. Thank you again for having me and look forward to catching up with folks.